Welcome to today's episode of the Women in Medtech Podcast. This is a larger part of the series done by the Medtech Business Academy, and I'm your host, Colleen Patterson. With me today are Abby Norfleet, Barbara Strain, and Stephanie Pitts. And our special guest today is Deena Brecher. Deena is renowned for her work in emergency care. She leverages her extensive experience to oversee Mednition's critical nursing strategy, ensuring the highest standard of patient care and nursing excellence. She's the 2025 Academy of Emergency Nursing Board Chair and previously served as the 2014 Emergency Nurse Association National President. Deena presents, publishes, and teaches on a broad range of topics advancing nursing, nationally recognized, and is a recipient of numerous awards and honors. We are so excited to have you here today, Deena.
It's amazing to be here. We don't talk about the technology and nursing and women together enough.
Well, we are so excited to meet you, and I'm going to actually give a big kudos moment right here at the beginning to Abby. One of our items, as all of our team of regular hosts are out and about in our lives and meeting people, is to look for the people that we think are really pushing the boundaries of what it means to be in healthcare, especially what it means to be a woman in healthcare. And Abby actually is the one who linked us together. Abby, before we dive into Deena's background, why don't you tell a little bit of how you and Deena were first connected?
Thank you, Colleen. And again, thank you, Deena, for being here and giving us the time. So Deena and I, we've crossed paths a couple times, unfortunately not as often as I would have hoped. Sometimes vacations and life just gets in the way of that. But the organization that I'm currently with, Curin, we have a big focus in emergency nursing, emergency nursing. And so we've partnered with an organization that Deena has had a very big part of over the years that I think that she will also talk about a little bit today, and excited to hear more about that. But we were working together at an engagement meeting, and I got to hear her speak about what it is that she does and what their company is currently doing. And one of the things that first struck me was we do hear the whole buzz term and buzzword of AI all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of, especially those of us that come from the bedside as previous nurses and now are kind of in this business realm and seeing where the disruptive technology is going, taking a step back and saying, well, what does that actually mean? And Deena just did such an amazing job kind of expressing what her company does, but really the importance of nurses having a voice in even this type of platform, because it seems so more techie focused. And I was just really impressed with how she navigates bringing those over that aren't as familiar with that aspect of technology, being more in the digital age and era, and tying it together and how it will continue to increase the longevity of patients, patient care, but then as well as being able to elevate a whole other side of the nursing profession that's still near and dear to my heart on a whole other level that I don't think I ever thought of. And I think, I'm excited that she's here because I'm excited just to hear some of her wisdom and tidbits that she has for those that might be interested in jumping into that space as well, while maintaining the whole reason why we've been here in the first place. And that's just to improve and optimize patient care.
Deena, I think that you have probably one of the most fascinating story arcs of how you got to this table of where you are right now. That, I get the opportunity to meet a lot of people, founders, those who have been incredibly successful throughout their journey. And I remember, going back to, it was almost 2 months ago now when you and I first connected the very first time, and really feeling like, man, you have got a story to share. So, why don't you give our audience just a little bit of that background of, how you got to be in the CNO role at Mednition?
Sure. It's totally by accident is the short version of the story. I started as a nurse by chance, not necessarily by choice, and was always drawn to a CNS that I worked with in my first job, really understanding how to help nurses be better. And so after traveling for a while, I went to the University of Texas in Houston and got my master's as a clinical nurse specialist. and had that role for a little over 10 years here in Delaware. Loved it, loved everything about it. At the same time, I was a lot of my volunteer work with ENA. I was starting to participate more on the national level and ultimately getting elected to the board and to president in 2014. I left the Nemours and popped over to Cincinnati Children's for a little while as an ED director. And in that time, I was introduced to the co-founders of Mednition. When I was ENA president, a physician that I adore, Kevin Clower, he was the Speaker of the House at the American College of Emergency Physicians at the time. And so we got to know each other, and I spoke at the same conferences he did a couple times. And he called me out of the blue. It'd been like 2 years since the last time I talked to him. And he said, "Hey, I met these two guys. This is what they're trying to do. I knew we needed a nurse, and you are the first and only name that came to my head because it's right up your alley with quality and safety and helping nurses be better." And he said, "Talk to them and call me back." And when Kevin asks you to talk to somebody, you do it. You do it. He's just brilliant and just one of the nicest people I've ever met. And so I talked to Steve and Christian, the co-founders of Mednition, and they told me what they wanted to do. There's a lot of conversation about reporting off of free text and being able to read the medical record. And I laughed. To be totally honest, I laughed. I'm like, you can't do that. My life as a clinical nurse specialist, as an ED director, would have been so different if what you're saying could actually happen. And I had zero faith that they were right. But the only thing I had to lose at that point was time. And so I was so excited about their passion and the why they wanted to bring the technology we use in the outside world into healthcare, that all I had to lose was time at that point. And so I agreed to come on as an advisor. As you know, we were doing the research on Kate, and our biggest research partner said, "Stop doing research, just get this into the hands of the nurses." And that's when I joined the company full time. My job was to get Kate in the hands of the nurses. Cannot do that alone. An amazing engineering team to make that, a data science team to make that happen. And then over the last 6 years, it's really been understanding the impact of leveraging nurse first AI, where nurses have a say in all of the pieces and parts that it takes to get Kate into an organization, and how that positively impacts patient care. But also from a nursing perspective, I feel like somebody has my back, right? I feel like I'm being supported, which is something that we don't have in nursing, right? And every time I pop on my computer and I get my Becker's and it talks about AI this and AI that, not once are they talking about AI that is for nurses by nurses. And there's so many possibilities and ways in which this type of technology can really help us be successful at the bedside and be able to go home at night knowing that we did everything we possibly could. And the only way to do that is to have nurses at the table.
So much of the way that you presented it, not only today, but even those few months ago when we first met, Deena, felt to me like, is this the way that if we had sat down with a clinician in the 80s and said, this is what the future of charting is going to look like, and somebody would be like, well, there's no way. It sounds like the future of medicine. I'm actually going to pass the conversation over to Stephanie, because one of the items that you just said was it's for nurses by nurses. And I know that that's a piece with all of the work that Stephanie's done in the past that is really near and dear to her heart. Stephanie, how did that resonate with you?
Yeah, well, first of all, Deena, it's so nice to meet you. And we have some similarity in background. So pediatrics, my love, and I was also a pediatric ED nurse for many years. So always nice to have those similarities. But I'm a huge fan of making sure that nurses have a seat at the table. Just 25 years working in healthcare, recognized there were many decisions that were made without us, and they directly impacted us. I think of my electronic health record go live, and the service my entire team provided was not included. And it's like, how did you miss this? Like, we have entire business units that do this and it wasn't included. So I love to hear that. And I think about AI in the same way you introduced it, right? Like it seems like this fluffy, fake thing that we're trying to bring into healthcare. So can you help me help our audience and maybe just give a couple of real world examples? I'm a nurse. I'm taking care of my patients in the hospital. Tell me how the work you're doing can directly make my life easier so that I have more time to care for the patients we serve.
You hit the nail on the head. So I have more time, right? That's really using AI to reduce the administrative burden. Where Kate supports nurses is in triage in the emergency department. So the first decision, right? The first assessment that happens to make sure the right patient's getting in front of the right provider at the right time. It's the most important decision that we make as nurses as we care for patients. And we are expected to figure out how sick you are and how soon you need to be seen in 3 to 5 minutes with limited information. Yet the EHR is full of information and we just don't have that kind of time. Plus, when I ask a patient, do you have any medical problems? I don't always get the information I need to make the right decision. And so Kate supports the nurse's decision-making because Kate's going to do that work for the nurse. I'm still going to do my assessment. I'm still going to document my assessment. I'm still going to make my decision. In the meantime, Kate's taking everything I documented, free text, right-click, comment, vital signs, and the history that's in the record that we just don't have that kind of time. Kate will use all that to make a prediction about the patient, about the acuity of the patient and sepsis as well. And I'll only send the nurse a message if there's something clinically important to say. So Kate doesn't get in the way, doesn't add time to what we're doing, does the task that I don't have time for, which is reviewing the EHR, and then taps me on the shoulder when there's something, maybe a picture I didn't put together, or a piece of information that was important in the history that I didn't have, that is going to impact the trajectory of that patient. So it's not, Kate doesn't replace nurses, right? So the first thing I say when we're implementing is Kate's not here to replace anybody. Kate doesn't work without the nurse. But Kate's going to help us make the best decision possible so that we get the right patient to the right place at the right time.
One of the things that I think is really dynamic, and we don't go into, and I'm Abby, I totally cut you off, so I'm going to wing it back to you here in just one second, is that we don't normally go into, for anybody who's been a listener of our podcast series for a while, we don't normally go into like, well, tell us about your organization. But to me, your organization is approaching AI so differently than the way that we see it with so many. We're talking nurse first. We are talking nurse supportive. We are talking about supplemental. So much of what we've heard is about how it's going to ease the provider burden. But we all know that, in our upcoming years, we've talked about our critical nurse shortage. And these are the organizations, like, programs like Kate, organizations like Mednition, that I really think that when we get to those days where we're looking at that mass retirement, that you guys are really putting in the groundwork first. And I was so excited to talk to you that very first time. Abby, what were you going to say?
It was very similar to the vein that you already were going into. So thank you for that. I will say that the other thing, and I shared this with Deena whenever we got a chance to talk about her coming onto the podcast and stuff, is that, again, I was one of those of AI sounds really cool. And to use Stephanie's words, but is it a fluffy fake thing that I can't see really impacting nursing because we are such a hands-on approach. Mm-hmm. Our mutual friend that we have, Jack Rogers, I remember talking to him too about why he felt so strongly about it. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I could understand for, those patients that you might be under triaging a little bit because you're getting so backed up in the ED and things like that. And he said, well, there is something to be said about over triaging too, and the overall impact that it is leading to patients and the burden that is continuing to add to the nurses as well, because all of that continues to back up. And he said it really is one of the first pieces of technology that's not so much directly onto the patient, but something that a nurse has to use in the digital era that he finally found true value in, and not just something that was truly climbing up the ladder into the administrative offices. And that just something was even that resonated so much. And the fact that that has been the goal and mission from the very beginning, that I thought was really, really cool.
AI is your superpower. And that's really, to think about it from that perspective. For us, clinical involvement is in every step. We have clinical involvement in our data science process, in our modeling process, in the engineering. Like we all work together because there's not one discipline that can bring this forward, right? I am not an expert in AI. I do not know how to program in Python. I have an amazing team that listens to what we need from a nursing perspective, and then takes that and pushes the boundaries in what can help us. And I'll give you an example. When we integrated with one of the EHRs, our engineering team was beside themselves that it took 6 clicks for a nurse to get from triage or back into the patient record to make an adjustment in a note. And they were like, no, unacceptable. And they created a pathway to be able to create a link from the message from Kate directly back into the triage form. 1 click, boom, done. That's the kind of team that I have the fortune of working with, is a team that can't be done. They just don't, that is not part of the vocabulary. But how do they help support the nurses who use Kate to make our lives easier, at the same time by giving us that information that we need? And so AI feels like a superpower. It should feel like a superpower. It should make us more productive. It should give me more time to do the patient care things that I don't have time to do because I'm too busy typing right over here. That's a good use of AI, right? To reduce our administrative burden and allow us to do the things that only human nurses can do.
So I'm going to take us in a little bit different direction. And all of the great things, and I've been online and gone through some of your demos and things, and it is an amazing tool. What has been, and maybe there hasn't been, but what's been sort of the biggest roadblock that you might have run into in the adoption phase? Is it leadership? Is it finance? Is it IT? So I think the audience might like that point of view a little bit as well, and how you've handled it.
Yep. So I'm an ear nurse for 27 years, and some of us, there's nothing you can't tell me how to do that. And so, like any other change process, when we're implementing Kate, we've got our early adopters and innovators that are all over it. When we tested Kate the very first time in our very first emergency department, the nurses there were literally fighting over who was going to get to test with us. Okay. And then we've got in the middle of the road, and they're going to do what they need to do. And then there's always one or two who will do whatever they can do not to get a message from Kate. It's very creative. But my favorite story, one of those nurses sent me a message. Nurses can message us from a Kate message. We love feedback. So we encourage them. If they disagree with a prediction, let us know. It's how we prioritize, how we make Kate better. And she sent me a message about a patient that Kate had sent her a message that the patient needed to be in ESI 2 because they had preeclampsia. And the nurse messaged me and said, this patient is hypertensive, but in all caps, not pregnant. And so I was able to say, hey, the evidence shows that we're looking for this condition up to 6 weeks postpartum. Here's some research on that. And she messaged me back and she said, I didn't know that. I'm going to tell everybody who's here. And then about 6 months after that, she pulled her manager aside and said, hey, you know what? Sepsis thing, best thing we've ever done. But I took a triage test in my other job and I got 100, and it's because of Kate. And so even if I'm not sure this is what I need, Kate is going to catch a mistake I make that I didn't know I made, because I'm human and we make mistakes all the time. Help me correct it in the moment, not getting in trouble. There's not like the Kate police that come beat you or anything like that. And so that's what helps with the adoption. But the most important thing when we're implementing is that the leadership teams are giving the nurses the feedback. This is the difference Kate's making. We implemented in Spear of Vineland couple weeks ago now, like 2 weeks ago. And on day one, like patient 5, we had a great catch happen to be around preeclampsia again. And we share that with the whole team because we want people to know that Kate's not perfect, but these are the types of situations. That's why Kate has their back, and that's the key to a really successful adoption is that feedback. Here's what Kate's catching. Here are the decisions the nurses made that were the best decision, even though Kate disagreed with them. And here's how we learn and what we're learning about the care we're providing and the things we're doing really well, and then the things we have opportunities to improve.
Deena, you mentioned opening up your computer in the morning and seeing the Becker's articles, and Becker's has had a slew of articles this calendar year alone about nurses in particular pushing back about the use of AI, of feeling some sort of way about the idea that this was going to come for their job. And I know you've made a couple comments about like, this isn't designed for that. But I think that I've got a couple additional questions. Our audience is about, right now, getting pretty close to 50-50 of people who have clinical backgrounds and those that are in the medical technology space. And I think there are some really interesting things that we could talk about on, although Kate is a learning program, how do you, from a clinical perspective, how do you evaluate good AI or bad AI? Like, what do those terms mean? There are so many more questions about what AI looks like right now than there are answers. And I don't think we've ever had anybody as knowledgeable as you are. So I'm going to dig in your brain for a little bit.
We'll give it a whirl. Understanding good AI and bad AI is I don't want to say a skill. There is a roadmap for it, right? And there's actually a model that came out of Ireland. I don't have it in front of me, meant to help nurses understand AI, the found that we need to be teaching in nursing school so that we can be good consumers and be able to tell the difference between good AI and bad AI. For me, and this is my experience, my opinion, the number one hesitation from nursing that has been in the press is the ability to not follow the advice of whatever tool that is. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at AI, first of all, it's what's the problem that it's meant to solve? And is that a problem that we have? Because too often there's the shiny squirrel, the shiny object over here that looks really cool, and let's do it just because it looks cool, and it's kind of like a problem, a solution looking for a problem. And so if you're looking to bring in AI, you need to understand the tool, what problem is it trying to solve, and do we actually have that problem? And then you want to understand how what is it trying to measure, and how do we know that it's measuring that correctly? And in that case, you want to make sure that the vendors that you're working with are transparent about model performance, right? There's a lot in the news related to EHRs and some of their AI models, and that they're not transparent in showing you how well the model's doing or how well it's not doing. I know Stephanie wants to add. So
yeah. I was just going to ask, I'm sitting here listening to you and inspired, right? And I guess my question is, and without you giving any of your business secrets away, what do you think we have to do in the industry to hit the gas? Like, to get over this, I think as humans, we're sort of somewhat blocking, whatever that is, whether it's doubt, lack of comfort with technology, et cetera. But what do you think it's going to take to really hit the gas and really take programs like yours and others that are on the market and really get the momentum and the speed beyond this early adopter phase? What's it gonna take?
If I had a magic wand to answer that question, I think it's gonna take a couple different things, right? It's gonna take companies really listening to what's happening in healthcare, in nursing, and we should be saying, hey, an AI solution would lend itself to this problem over here, right? Why am I spending so much time at the computer when AI can do that? It's not possible for me to be looking and putting the picture together for all these different pieces. Can I use generative AI to kind of serve that up? And so we, as nurses, have to step up and say, this is what we need. We need to solve this problem. Then we have to be part of that process, right? So, okay, we're going to solve this problem. Well, help me understand the problem. What does a perfect world look like to you? What does your perfect day at work look like to you? And then we iterate, right? So here's the technology. Try it out. What do you think? I'm going to take the feedback back. We're going to make some changes, and we're going to continue to do that until the problem we were trying to solve is solved, and the team's got 90 million other ideas for other problems to solve. It's Cole Edmondson, who is a friend of mine. He was the CNO at Texas Presbyterian when I was ENA president, and there's a lot of Ebola stuff that went on. But he said to me that true innovation does not have an ROI. That in order for us to push the envelope, we have to take that risk, right? We have to do that. And there are some organizations that are willing to do that. And there are some organizations that aren't. But if you are an organization that is willing to do that, you need to find a partner that's going to listen, that's going to work with you and whatever teams that we have to be able to solve that problem, measure the heck out of it, and then shout it from the rooftops. And the I don't want to say the horror stories, but the pushback about, AI shouldn't tell me what to do. There's a lot of data that we have that in certain situations, certain types of conditions, sepsis being one of them, that AI sees things better than we do. Mm-hmm. And so we have to understand why we have the tool, what it's supposed to be measuring, how do I know it's doing the right thing, so that I can make an informed decision about whether or not overriding the tool is the right thing to do. And we have to get over that as a profession. We have to get over the fact that we think we have to have the final say in everything. And I say that because that's where we are now. And patients are dying because we think that way. And so we have to be able to open up our minds to say, and our internal clinical team, we had to do this too. We had to open up our minds to say, okay, you know what? The data we're looking at shows that we don't make this decision as well as a machine does. And so we have to be okay with that if we want to be able to save more lives, if we want to be able to reduce morbidity and mortality, and that is the big piece that we have to change in healthcare. That we can't just keep doing things the way we've always done them, because we're going to get the same results. And our results are not good in healthcare.
Deena, you just mentioned the importance of partnership. And I think that for our audience, they would love to learn more about, you guys are working to partner with the ENA. How did that happen? Because I think that when we're talking about get those get nurses out there, get that partnership to occur, those things don't just happen overnight. What does the value of that relationship mean to your organization, and how do you really see that shaping the future?
Well, our team is getting ready to go to the national conference, and I've never seen our sales and marketing team so excited. It's our favorite meeting of the year. You have to have a alignment in your mission, right? And we were ready with a commercial product about the same time that ENA acquired ESI, or the Emergency Severity Index. So from a timing perspective, it was perfect. ENA also knew that we as a profession hadn't done a lot of new research on triage, and the patient population, a lot has changed, and they needed a research partner to be able to understand what's evolved and how we might need to update the tool. And so that's where the partnership kind of started, was we've got this data set, you've got these questions, and how can we kind of come together? What has happened since then is just pretty phenomenal. We've published a couple papers. We just submitted another one to be able to understand our profession better, understand kind of the value of emergency nursing, where we have a really great skill and where we might need a little bit of support, which then helps the association decide what's the next thing that they need to focus on. So it's kind of like this continuous loop, just like we have with the nurses who use the product. They're sending us feedback. We're using that to make Kate better. The things that we learn from our clients, from our data that we share with ENA, they get to use as they go forward, and the things that they're learning about what's important to emergency nurses and what may not be, we get to learn that as well. And so it's a partnership that, I joined ENA when I graduated nursing school because I was of the class in 97, that was what you did, right? Nobody was hiring new grads. So it was anything you could do to get a leg up. And so you joined your professional association. But I didn't really get engaged and involved for her about 5 years. And even then, I just kind of puttered around a little bit. I started to get involved when peds came into play, right? It was the pediatric patient, the care of the pediatric patient, something I was so passionate about, and talking about creating a certification. And that's was my kind of foray into the national side of ENA. But professional associations have a huge role in defining our practice. And so for a professional association to partner with an AI company to be able to kind of push those boundaries, it's very forward thinking. And we are grateful for it. And I, wear now so many hats when I come to the same meeting. Abby, what role am I playing today? Which is great because it just gives me a much broader view of our practice, our profession. And that just makes me a better leader and better able to articulate, what's going well and where we as a company can support the people we care so much about.
Great.
So I know we're getting.
Abby?
I was going to say, I know we're getting close on time, but one of the questions and one of the things that I'd love for you to touch on, Deena, is in one of our conversations, you made a comment of we really have to figure out how to get nursing more involved in engineering or nurses to more think like engineers or things like that. So anybody that is listening that is hearing this, what advice do you have for them? Because it's not like it's a very easy thing to say, oh, I'm going to go get an engineering degree tomorrow. That's a whole other level, and honestly, not how really probably most of us are wired, since our paths really more took us to the patient care side of things. But what would you recommend for that? Because there should be a bridge, and you've managed to overcome it.
Managed to overcome it and not be an engineer, and it is possible to do that, right? It's being passionate about what you want to change, and then not being afraid to reach out to someone who does something differently than you do, to be able to come together to come up with that solution. So for me, it was networking and a conversation you had 2 years ago that comes back. But nurses in an academic organization have a little bit of an advantage because it's an academic organization and it's easy to kind of reach out. But we talk to vendors all the time, right? And so if I, as a nurse, want to learn more and want to be more engaged, that's where I would start, is what's a product that I really love that I think could be better, and reach out to that company. What's the worst thing they're going to say? No, we don't really care. That's the worst thing that can happen. The same to the companies that are looking at creating technology to be used in healthcare. If you're not talking to nurses about the products that nurses are going to use, good luck. We're not going to use them, right? And when we don't use them, then we're hesitant to then try the next product because the last one didn't work. So we need industry to reach out, to be, actively recruiting nurses to be able to inform what they're doing as well. So I don't have a magic answer. Just, don't be afraid to keep asking questions and keep making phone calls until you get somebody who's going to listen.
So over the last few months, we've been hitting on various topics through books that we've read and things like that. And one of was the Heart of Innovation. And we've been talking about biased in studies. And in so many studies that have been put through either for tests, new devices, drugs, they may not have included like women or certain races or other demographics. So how does the AI piece of this say overcome that? So if they're presented with some of the basic information that might say this is a male, certain age, a certain classification, or a woman, how does it overcome that?
Great point. If you institutionalize bias in an AI model, you're going to have a biased AI model. And so when we started, we had to come up with a strategy to reduce, to minimize bias in the model. And then we're always testing to make sure that we did that. And so in the emergency department, every color, everything, right? And so the only information that Kate used to train on was age and gender, and that's it. No social determinants of health, no race, ethnicity, none of the identifying information. And that was intentional. And then we validate that we continue, because we're always training Kate, we're adding new records, we're always doing that. We validate that we did a good job by looking in our data set where we know nurses are biased in their decision making. And we compare how Kate does on those patients to how the nurses do. And for us, it's an ongoing process. And we've done a pretty good job. Now, we're biased in our documentation. And so when we're picking cases, we're reviewing cases that we're going to kind of add more weight in the training set. If we see that, we don't use that case. Because it's important, again, to keep working to minimize the bias. It depends on what kind of model you're building and what that might look like. But for our model, that was our intention when we started, and it's a really important thing for us to continue.
It's good to know. Thank you.
Abby, as Abby mentioned, we are getting toward the end of time, and we've had some great final, thoughts and questions from both Abby and Barbara. Stephanie, did you have anything you wanted to add here toward the end of the conversation?
Yeah, Deena, I think you said something that kind of hit a sweet spot that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And that is, it doesn't matter if your technology is for nursing or for physicians or speech language pathologists or whatever the specialty is. If you don't have the end user at the table, part of the design, the development, and then part of the company, right? You won't optimize ultimate success. So I love that you hit on that. And I love that your organization, understands that as well. So thank you for all that you've shared with us today.
It's important to me. It's important to our whole company. And that's why I have the role that I do. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think my favorite phrase that you said today, Deena, was that true innovation does not have an ROI. We talk about a larger mission. We're all in healthcare really for the patient to do right by them. And that statement alone, just that hit very near and dear to my heart. It has been such an honor to have you here today, and your feedback and insights really demonstrate what Stephanie just said, how important it is to have the right voices at the table. Your mission of what you and Mednition are doing with Kate is not possible without people with your passion. And I think that there's a lot of things that you shared there about how organizations can be structured and how to move that end using audience into what the next chapter of health delivery is going to look like. You guys you're forging a new path, and I cannot say that I could be any more excited to see how your story arc develops, over these next few years. It has been such a pleasure to have you on today. For our audience, if you have not already done so, be sure to subscribe to never miss a future episode of the Medtech Business Academy, and we appreciate having you here today. Thank you.